want to welcome everybody to this evening's Malliard Report. Before we begin, I've got to remind everybody, tonight's show is the views and opinions are those of the host and guests and do not represent any sponsor, affiliate, sponsor, anybody else. Having said that, I hope everybody's having a good evening. If you have not subscribed to the program, please subscribe now. So my guests tonight, plural, I guess we should clear that up. I found them the other day. This is a breaking story. Well, I don't want to throw the breaking on that. That's not quite true. It happened, Thursday, I think it was? But they are the co-directors of Hoaxed, which was banned by Amazon, which I'm a little confused by, but we'll get into that first. Let's first throw it to Jon. Oh, God, you told me how to pronounce your name now. Now I've got the vulgar version going through my head. Jon.
Inception. I incepted that idea into your head. No, Jon du Toit.
Jon, so give me a little bit of, just a brief about you before we get too far into the project so people know where you're coming from.
Oh, brief about me. Well, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm living in British Columbia, Canada. And, Hoaxed was my first feature documentary. I don't really know what more to say, but that's sort of the nutshell version of that. So.
Well, that's a start, right? That's where we needed something just to kind of get us going. And gotcha. Scooter Downey. Scooter, how are you doing this evening?
Doing awesome. Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here.
And a little bit about you so we can kind of hear the voice and get that all familiarized with people.
Absolutely. I am also an independent filmmaker. I'm from Kentucky, been out here in LA for a while, just doing the independent thing. And Hoaxed was just an awesome opportunity. And so I'm continuing to work in this sort of subgenre of independent political stuff, but also faith-based. And it's an interesting pond to be in.
So let's start with Jon. Jon, so this comes to you as your first documentary. So how did that come together?
Yeah, so in 2017, Mike Cernovich, he put out a tweet saying that he wants to make a follow-up to his documentary Silenced, and he wanted to hire a new director because the last guy didn't work out so well. He's a little bit of a little bit of a crackpot. So he put out this tweet saying that he wants to hire a director, and people that are interested need to submit, just like a hypothetical trailer for a film called Hoaxed, which is about media bias and fake news and everything. And so I saw that as an opportunity, something I've wanted to do a film on that for a long time, actually. And it's a topic that I've been interested in for a long time. And so I jumped at the opportunity, submitted a trailer, and Mike picked myself and Scooter as co-directors, which is kind of amazing because when we first heard that he picked two guys that have never met before and never worked together before, we were a bit nervous, but it worked out so well. We really formed like a like a brotherhood, I guess, on the film, as well as with our cinematographer Justin Gum, really good guy as well, and he helped make the film look really awesome, and it was just a really good experience, and things just worked out. It was like lightning in a bottle. So yeah.
So Scooter, since you had been around for a while, how did you take the news of becoming a co-director?
Yeah, well, I was skeptical for sure. I think because it was a documentary, it's like, okay, maybe this can work. I think if it was a fiction film, that would have been very, very difficult. It's usually the only people you work with co-directing is like your brother or like your wife or something. So yeah, we were skeptical, but I think in our first conversation, we were just very open and just honest about our feelings and our salaries and everything, and kind of, got built up a little bit of trust, and so it ended up working out.
So Jon, take me back to right after you start working together on this. Was this what you imagined it would be doing? I mean, because you said, it was like kind of your first gig in. I mean, obviously, I'm guessing you had some prior experience somewhere in this film back end stuff, but when you're sitting in a different chair, so to speak.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've been making, I've been in the film world since 2005, 2006. I went to film school in Toronto, and I've just been active in that scene. But like right around 2013, 14, I just started to feel like I don't really belong there. And these are all really good people, that I was around and everything, but it just didn't feel like my home really, and I wasn't satisfied with what I was doing and all that. So I moved out to BC in 2015. I live in a really small town. There's no film industry here at all. I mean, there's like nothing here. And so it was kind of like a step of faith for me, but I felt it was the right thing to do. And then, 2 years later, this whole thing with Hoaxed happened. So yeah, I've at that point, I've had experience in filmmaking and all that. So that wasn't like a daunting challenge for me, but it was like the first big opportunity where you feel like you can work on something that you believe in and feel like you can make an impact. That you want to see in the world. So that was a really big step for me.
So amazing follow-up at this point, because your partner here, Scooter, moved to L.A. to pursue his film dreams, I'm assuming, right? But you moved to a small town in British Columbia. That seems a little off the grid, I guess, bad pun.
Yeah.
How did you end up there?
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's a story that it doesn't really make a lot of sense when I tell it, to people. But like I said, I was in Toronto at the time. My wife and I were living in a small apartment, and I just kind of felt this sense of like, this is not where God wants me to be. And we both had this feeling. My wife and I both had this sense of like we need to move out west. And so through some family. Some family connections, I guess. This one opportunity opened up for us to move with my brother, who had been living in Alberta for 5 years at that point, to move together with him to BC. And so we were like, well, this is it. This is our opportunity. We're just going to do it. So my wife left her job, and I left my film industry contacts behind in Toronto, and we just set out to this small town, middle of nowhere, not knowing what was going to happen. But, if I look back to the past 5 years, it was definitely the right decision for us. Because we live in a small town community now. It's a really good place for us to raise our two boys. And, things are just better here. I think if shit hits the fan, this is a much better place to be than the big city. I make decisions like that, where I just feel like, okay, this is where God wants me to go. And then, if I feel, if that sense is strong enough, I will act on it. And that's what we did.
Yeah, I was going to say, as we're talking right now, it doesn't necessarily mean you could be anywhere in the world and still be rapidly connected. I mean, there are some things you have to be there for, but for most things, you can kind of do this for. That's
right. Yeah, well, so in 2016, so I was involved in politics in about 2004, and I learned a lot there. I kind of got really disillusioned there. I just saw things were done in the background, and it was not. It was just not a good experience for me. I guess it was a good experience in hindsight, but I just kind of got disillusioned and just left all that behind. But then in 2015, 2016, with the U.S. election, I got back into it because I saw what was happening with Trump and all that, and that's how I started to follow Mike on Twitter. And that's obviously then how I one thing led to another, and that's how Hoaxed came to be. So it was an interesting path.
We'll get there in a second, but I kind of put words in your mouth a little bit ago, Scooter, that you moved to L.A. to pursue films. I'm assuming that's correct, but tell me I am right.
No, you're absolutely right. I came to LA to seek fame and fortune, and got a disillusioned pretty quick. I had made an independent film out of film school, and came here to LA to finish it up, and it was a kind of post-production nightmare scenario because we ended up editing it for like 2 years off and on, and had some tiffs with certain people that were involved in distribution, which is kind of funny. And I got told that after I was basically offered like, hey, if you do this cut, this film will be a success. But it wasn't a political film at all. It was a horror film. But they said, if you do this our cut our way, man, it'll do good. And I went to the investors and I said, hey, this isn't what my artistic vision was, but if this is something that's commercial for you guys, like I will, do what you want. And they're like, no, we bought into your vision. You go with your cut. And then these people told me, you'll never work in Hollywood again. And I had just moved out there. And in a way they were right, because it was difficult to even get an internship out here. It's a very closed system if you're not, in the club, if you don't have networking or you don't have a cousin or something out here. So I ended up doing a lot of freelance film work for a long time and just a bunch of odd jobs. And eventually I got to my wit's end, and I remember I was either going to become a pastor or go into the Army. Went to the Army recruiting office, and I was praying for open doors in my life. And I got contacted by Open Doors Ministry to do some video work for them and do a short documentary for them. And so God literally answered my prayer. And so I was like, okay, Open Doors, this is where I need to go. I need to start making things that I really believe in that are either faith-based and then I went from going to faith-based to now into politics. And so I'm doing the two things you shouldn't do in public, but it seems to be working out.
Financial advice right now? We can just, yeah.
Exactly. So, it's been interesting. I've been here 10 years now, but it's a grind, man. I've seen a lot of people come and go.
So I'm going to kind of open this up a little bit because you two can step over. You guys have a good enough relationship to know a little bit here. Maybe there's some things that somebody wants to chime in here. But so the 2016 election seems to be, Jon mentioned that was kind of his tipping point in getting into politics. Was that yours as well, Scooter? Obviously you've probably been more into American politics than he was, but.
Yeah, I started getting into politics around I started getting into politics like after 9/11. I was actually a liberal, a long time liberal after that, because I was against the Iraq War and Bush and all of that. I supported Obama in his first term. And then I realized that he was just like everyone else. He was going to, go with the same globalist agenda. So I stopped supporting him. And at that point, I started, shifting my political philosophy and was reading other people. And so I was into it for a while before the 2016 election, but when it came, it was definitely, it was the singular focus for a lot of people. And I had worked with Mike Cernovich before on short videos and on some shorter documentaries. So I volunteered to just do videos for him. And then that's how we started our relationship.
But Jon, it has to be different. It has to be a different perspective, because when I pay attention to Canadian politics, which I rarely do, but when I do, it feels strange being an outsider trying to understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's true. But the thing is with U.S. politics, everybody in the world pays attention to it, right? Everybody's looking at what's going on in the U.S., so it's a little bit different that way. But no, politics here. It looks different, but. It's like it operates on the same principles, right? Like you have two parties, and they're not that different from each other, but there's a big show in front of the cameras and all this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, it's like this whole continuity of an agenda kind of thing that keeps going on, and the real change makers are on the outside, right? And they don't have a lot of support and that kind of thing. So you just kind of see, the whole country just barreling down this path of destruction. So I think what I really liked about the U.S. election obviously was Donald Trump, because when I saw his speech, when he launched his campaign, I knew then and there that this guy was different. So I actually did not like Donald Trump before this. I thought he was an idiot. I thought he was a loudmouth and just crass, and all that stuff, right? But when I saw that speech, I'm like, this guy's going to win the Republican nomination, hands down. Like, I knew that would happen. I thought at that point that he'd probably lose the election because of voter fraud and all this stuff. But I was really excited to see somebody talk about the issues that nobody wanted to talk about in politics, but that, the people cared about. And a lot of the same issues are the same issues up here in Canada where, things like immigration. I mean, we have a huge problem with that up here as well. And nobody has the balls to talk about it. So we had one guy in this last election. So for us, that was last year, 2019. French-speaking guy, Maxime Bernier. And he was the only one with the balls to talk about it, but it didn't take off the way it did for Donald Trump, So obviously with Donald Trump, you have somebody who, it's just somebody that the cameras can't really look away from. And he used that to his advantage. Up here, we didn't quite have that situation. And so, we have Turd Boy back, Mr. Blackface. And as you can tell, things are going swimmingly up here, right?
Well, I was told that waving hello to my chat room. I actually should probably say that instead of actually doing it because it makes more sense on audio. John, I was supposed to ask you, do you think Western Canada will actually break away and become its own country? Canada it?
I don't know. It's a hard question for me to answer because, and this may sound a little bit mean, to my fellow citizens, but, there's not really a sense of fighting spirit here in this country. It's, like with you guys, you Americans, you have your problems and all that, but, I do get along with you guys really well because you've got the Revolutionary War and all that in your psyche. We don't have that. That being said, I think if it's going to happen, it will happen in Alberta. They seem to have a fighting spirit that the rest of the country lacks. So I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I think it would be the right thing to do. I think they need to be their own country in Alberta, and I would go there in a heartbeat if those moves are being made to go and help there and join that fight. So it's at this point, it's there's a lot of talk about it. It's a wish. I hope it comes true. But I just, there's not a lot of time. It needs to happen quickly.
Yeah, I think, that's where all this gets lost, right? It seems like everything drags and drags. But anyways, not to belabor that point either. Scooter, so let's get in. You've worked with Cernovich for a while now, so I believe what we see, right? Because he's always doing the periscopes and all that stuff. It's, from the hip, not necessarily from the hip, but you know what I'm saying. Is that legitimately is that, I don't want to say is that an act, but is that 24/7 him?
There's multiple mics, just like there's multiple versions of all of ourselves. Like when we talk to our mom, we're different when we talk to our mom than when we talk to our boss, right? So yeah, but I mean, when you hang out with Mike, I would say about 90% of the time he's on Twitter. So that's his persona on Twitter is he's entered into the simulation, So I think he's more honest in some ways on Twitter than he is maybe in real life. I don't know. But no, he's a very good, I think he's a very good family man. And he has been nothing but a good mentor to me. And but yeah, he's a very interesting guy because there's the whole idea of kayfabe, right? Where, and we talk about this in the film, or he talks about it, where if he's going to be labeled as the heel or the bad guy, well, then just like in pro wrestling, if you're the heel or the bad guy, you might as well play up into that persona and own it, rather than try to say, no, I'm really a nice guy who, had some problems in the past. Like, that's not persuasive. So he, just like Batman, puts on the mask and goes out and Twitter and tweets.
Kind of reminds me of another former guest of my show, Roger Stone. like leans into that persona probably more than he actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. We live in a very strange media created reality. And by the way, this isn't like something that's peculiar to Mike. I mean, there's a thing called social media. Guess what? You're putting on a persona and you're projecting that persona out to the world. It just so happens that you're probably projecting a boring persona because you don't want to be honest. You don't want to ruffle feathers, and you don't want to actually be honest. So that is a lot of people's personas, and that put that on social media. Or they say, hey, I'm really cool and popular, and I've been to this place and that place. I mean, that's the world we all are swimming in now, where there's versions of ourselves that we're projecting out.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch right now. Everybody, especially right now, well, there's nothing going on, so to speak. People trying to force an image that doesn't work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there has to be the closer it is to something authentic, then that's what people respond to. No one's going to respond to you being fake.
So, Jon, talk to me about the evolution of in your book. I know the documentary puts it out there, but let's talk just to you for a second about fake news and how you came to realize it, and B, then started to want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit vague, going back, but okay. First of all, I wasn't born in Canada. I was born in South Africa. My dad was he was a minister, so he went to basically pastor a church in Belgium when I was about 5 years old. And so I stayed in Belgium for about 9 years. So I grew up there, right? And then we moved to Canada when I was about 14. So when you move into a country, you're going to see things in a way that people who were born there don't see, right? And it didn't take long for us at that point to, just to see the media was just extremely biased, towards, like anything on the right wing politically. And it was most noticeable with we have a state broadcaster here, so it's the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and they operate on a budget of taxpayer dollars, right? So it's our tax money goes to the state broadcaster, and they just put out like the most left-wing propaganda. I mean, they've been doing this for decades now, right? So when we showed up in Canada, we noticed that fairly quickly. And, so we were always like very skeptical of the news media. And, we would rather watch like, CTV, which is, it's an actual business. But over the years, they've really gone to the left as well. There's really no mainstream, we don't have a Fox version up here. And I mean, Fox has its own issues, obviously, but I'm just saying, like, just on the left to right scale, which is flawed, but just based on that scale, we don't even have that. We've got at this stage now, we've got the Rebel online, which is run by Ezra Levant, who is an amazing patriot for this country and just totally undervalued. But he does great work for this country, and he really should be, one day placed in a Hall of Fame or something, if that still exists by then. But anyway, so for us, it was we really saw that bias when we moved in, and then as we started to get involved politically, we just saw how. The conservatives is who I helped, right? We just saw they were just completely ruled by the media. They were just too scared to say anything that might get them in trouble with the media. They just want to play nice with them and play footsie with the media, and it just didn't work. And there's some more to the story there, and I'm going to bore you with that. But at that point, it became very, very clear to me how much of an agenda there was on the part of the media. And then, of course, we also watch what's happening in the States, and you see the same thing there, CNN, all this stuff, right? So it's not like a very new realization to me, but as I learned more and as we were making the film and I'm doing research and into the stories, it's not shocking anymore, but you sort of just, you have to shake your head at how blatant it really is at this point, and that people still don't see it sometimes. Although that's becoming less of a common thing now. But I mean, just the wool that they pull over your eyes, right? The mind control. It's pretty staggering, really, to see once you wake up to it.
Yeah, it once, like you said, once you start into it, it's like you never go back.
That's right. Yeah, no, exactly.
So, Scooter, I'm going to put you right at the end of wrapping this up and putting it out, okay? I think, there's a lot of work that goes into it. I don't mean to skim over that, but the show's only an hour, so we have to move it forward at some point here. So it goes
Sure,
out.
skip to the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's stuff today we have to talk about too, right?
Right.
Well, we'll get back to the middle stuff here in a minute, but this just popped in my head, and I told you multitasking is not my thing right now today. So, so it goes out, right? How is it received immediately?
Well, when we first released the movie January of last year, 2019, and we were only able to put it out on one platform, which is Vimeo, because we had a distribution company at the time that was supposed to put it out on all the other platforms, but they were actually going under. And they weren't telling us that. So they tried to delay the inevitable for as long as they could. But we put it out on Vimeo alone, which, by the way, when you buy a movie on Vimeo, you have to have an account. It takes a long time to set up. It's not like you already have your Amazon account, your iTunes, or whatever. Everything's already set up for you. It did extremely well. I believe we ended up selling over 20,000 units. And just on Vimeo alone, without any marketing other than Mike, and very little support, from even other conservatives and other right wing or leaning people. But it did very, very well, and we were very, very proud of the movie. We knew it was good. So we went through that whole process, and we thought basically, okay, we're done now. We're sort of happy. We got a little bit of money, but Mike ended up putting some more of his own money in. We're okay. Then we get another distribution company once we find out our other one's failing and is going into flames, and they decide to put out the film, and we're like, great, all right, maybe we'll get a little bit more revenue on Amazon, iTunes, and it'll reach a little bit wider of an audience. But for all intents and purposes, we think it's basically over. And I'm driving, so we re-release it. Okay, it's selling pretty well. All of a sudden, it's starting to climb up the charts, and without any of our pushing it, it's just starting to climb up and up and up. Amazon, the rankings on Amazon, and we're like, wow, this is really cool. And I'm driving back to LA after spending some time away during this whole quarantine, and I see that Amazon has banned Hoaxed. And my immediate response is, this is fantastic. I'm very happy because I know this is the only thing that could possibly draw more attention to the film. Because this is something that Mike has talked about recently. There's just this there's an odd silence about the film. First of all, there's an odd silence from the mainstream media. If the film was terrible, the mainstream media would never stop talking about it. They would say, Mike Cernovich, this horrible person, made this horrible movie. Look how bad he is. Ha, ha, ha. But because it was good, silence from the mainstream media, but also silence from those on the right, because they don't like Mike, or they're jealous of Mike, or they think he's distasteful or whatever. And these are people that he's supported and allied himself with. And so we knew when Amazon banned us, this was it. And then from there, it was like, boom, now it's taken off. Now we're in the top, we're at number 6 all-time selling documentaries on iTunes, and we're just so grateful for everyone's support, because this was literally a ground-up organic thing with a little bit of help from Bezos.
So, well, obviously, it drove your star right to here. That brings it right to present day. Right here doing this show.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, we're not going to be going to the Academy Awards anytime soon, but
well, you never know. I mean, something. I mean, I don't think maybe documentary-wise, but something could strike. Don't put that out there that you're not going, just not for this. Right? I mean, straight.
Well, if I ever get an Oscar for something, I'm gonna have to sit down and really think about what I did wrong in my life.
Well, that was part of it. Was like I felt very strange that I've never been banned from anything. I'm like I'm definitely doing something wrong. Like this is not, because I feel like if you haven't been banned at this point, are you really living? So now I can put that outlaw status on myself.
Yeah, it's funny because it seems like on the part of big tech anyway, their most effective sort of tactic, I guess, would be shadow banning, right?
Yes.
Because when you shadow ban them and like sort of take them out of the algorithm and all that, people just don't know about it, right? And the marketing you have to do yourself. You have to grind it out, and if you don't have a big platform, it's just going to go nowhere, right? I mean, I did a film with Stefan Molyneux in Hong Kong, and I mean he's got almost 1 million followers on YouTube, and his account has been shadow banned for a long time. But every now and then he's got a video that will show up in in like a recommended feed or something like that. This particular thing that he put out, it's like a 2-hour documentary. Completely shadow banned. I mean, I've never seen a film as shadow banned as that. And I think it has. He launched it in December 9th, I think, something like that. It has 120,000 views. That's it. For somebody with an account of almost 1 million followers. So that's a very effective strategy, right? Now with Amazon, they come out and it is outright ban the film. I mean, just pull it, right? It was such a gift for us because now everybody sees what's going on, right? So they really overplayed their hand there, and it's just a wonderful thing, when somebody who doesn't like you makes such a great, right?
Yeah, so that leads me back into the film for a minute, which is where I wanted to go, but you guys kind of figured this out, maybe. I wanted to talk about Alex Jones because that's kind of the paramount of this ban. Well, started with shadow banning and then finally just ended up banning. John, talk to me about Alex Jones. I mean,
oh, sorry, yeah,
yeah.
I thought it was
I don't even know where to go with the question, but just
no, that's cool.
Just go.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I suck at podcasts, just so you know. So
that's fine. So do I. It's okay.
it's not my forte, but, anyway. No, Alex Jones. I mean, I consider him to be like the godfather of like the truth movement, right? And he's got this larger than life persona, and I think it served him very well. Now, obviously, there's pros and cons, with that kind of behavior. But I think on balance, it's a good thing because when he's acting crazy and stuff, that's going to draw people, to it's going to attract attention, right? And I mean, back in 2009, I think it was, he was talking about how I think it was the University of East Anglia in the UK. They were caught falsifying climate change data that was then used by the UN to make policy on climate. And somebody sent me that video. That's the first time that I saw Alex Jones, and I was immediately drawn to what he was saying. And back then, he was making a lot of documentaries as well, right? Things like Endgame, just really good stuff. And so I just devoured that stuff. Like I just stayed up this one night and watched like 2 or 3 documentaries, probably more than a night. And so he's really, I think he's responsible for waking up more people than anybody else out there. And so of course, when the powers that be and big tech and so on, when they want to ban somebody, he's the first guy they're going to ban. And he knows that. He talks about that in the film. He says that he's the guy, or I think it was Cassie J was saying that, we need people who will step out into the limelight and, get the Rotten Tomatoes, thrown at them and get attacked on behalf of everybody else and draw attention to these issues. And he's that guy. So he was always going to be the first guy to get banned. But, I think if you're going to make a movie about fake news and so on, then, you really need to have him in there, because he was the first guy to really be talking about this stuff. And, he's gone through some controversy, Sandy Hook and all this stuff. It's one of those issues where, if you say one thing, right, that maybe you don't, it's a belief you maybe don't really hold, or it's something that, you're maybe just floating out there to see what the reaction is or whatever. It's a discussion, right? He's having a discussion about this thing. The media will come in and they will take out that one thing you said, and that becomes now your identity, right? And that's what they've done to him. It's basically a straw man of Alex Jones that they attacked. And he's talked many times about, what his real beliefs are on Sandy Hook after the fact. But it's not good enough for the media, right? They want to take this guy down because he's too effective. And so it's no surprise, again, that they first shadow ban him, and then, Google was shadow banning him and all this stuff, right? And then all these platforms on, I think, the same day or the same week at least, just banned him off all their platforms, So, yeah, it's a sobering realization.
So, Scooter, I'm sure you have something to add about Alex, because before we get off of him, there's got to be something good there.
Oh,
sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think Alex deserves his own documentary or documentary series just about him and his life. When I was helping to edit that sequence, I was having to go through all those old clips and stuff I hadn't seen before. It's very interesting. But I think that Alex Jones is the greatest orator of the 21st century. I don't think you can find someone who could give a better improvised, inspirational speech than Alex. And I think that's the fundamental misunderstanding of who he is. If you think that he's some kind of Walter Cronkite hard news anchor, like what? That's not what he does. He's more like a shaman. He's like listening to the spirits and then looking at these articles and pontificating. And so, and also we know when he's hamming it up, and also we know when he's genuine, and they overlap, they intersect. But when you understand that, it becomes not offensive. It becomes entertaining and inspiring a lot of times. Like Jon, if you're gonna factually check every single thing he says, because guess what? He's using hyperbole like probably 95% of the time. But at the same time, can you use enough hyperbole in the light of Epstein? Because I've been listening to Alex off and on for a while before he was banned, and he was talking about this stuff for a long time. And I remember when Mike was talking about Epstein, and I was trying to tell people about it, and it was a conspiracy theory back then. Well, guess what? We had drone footage of the temple. We had public documents about him being a child trafficker, and all of a sudden now everyone is in on the conspiracy theory that he didn't kill himself. Well, that's great. I'm glad. But, you have people that have been talking about this stuff for a long time. And, the Sandy Hook thing, if on the one hand, if someone said that my kid didn't die and that I am an actor, that guy better look over his shoulder. And on the other hand, there have been a number of false flags in human history. They didn't just stop in the 60s, So is it okay for an American broadcaster to speculate about whether an event is possibly a false flag or not? Yes, this is America. It's freedom of speech. Where you draw that line, maybe there's something, that becomes actionable. But on the whole, I think Alex he's a force of nature. When we met with him, he's larger than life, even though he's not as tall as you would expect. But he comes in, he's got all this barbecue set up for us before our interview, and he just comes in, he grabs the barbecue like a caveman, just shoving it in his mouth. It was, and then during his interview, he was just so nice, and wanting to do a good job for us. And he was willing to make all of those faces. There's a sequence in the film where it's just a montage of Alex Jones making funny and clown faces and angry faces, and he was game for that. So that's all I have to say about Alex.
Yeah, that was a great sequence of film. I was actually was on my notes to ask you about. Was that his idea or one of you guys' ideas?
That was our idea. We knew we wanted to show off the many faces of Alex Jones, because, like I said, during a broadcast, you can go from doing an impression of a trendy to being an angry prophet character to being a family man. So we wanted all of those aspects of himself to be kind of colliding together. And we didn't plan, which was crazy, was we opened that sequence and we have clown music playing. Alex decided that day in one of his broadcasts he was going to put on a clown mask, the It clown mask, and do a skit. And we didn't tell him to do that, but it ended up being perfect for what we wanted for the film. There were a lot of crazy stuff like that during the shoot.
So let's do this right here before I forget. Jon, what are you working on now, and where can people find you?
Where can people find? What am I working on now? And where can people? Okay, so first of all, you can find me on Twitter at Jon du Toit. That's JONDUTOIT. My website address is jondutoit.com. I started blogging last year, but it's not really my thing. So I might write some things every now and then, but it's not going to be a main pastime for me. So that's where you can find me online. What I'm working on now, I'm working on the last episode of the Sunset and the Golden State series that I shot with Stefan Molyneux. It's about the decline and fall of California. We did that last February. So February 2019, we went to California and just walked around with a camera basically, and just shot a bunch of stuff and decided it should become a series. So it's like a mini documentary series, and we had to put that on hold to do the Hong Kong thing in September. But now the last episode will be coming out soon, and so that's what I'm working on at present. I'm also writing some things, and some other things I can't really talk about. But yeah, staying busy.
Well, you can talk about them. Nobody. Oh no, wait, I won't even get. I have to try though, right? Scooter. So where can people find you, and what are you currently working on?
They can find me on Twitter at True Legend Films, truelegendfilms.com, and probably somewhere in the middle of the pandemic apocalypse in LA, when the S hits the fan. But right now I'm working on a independent superhero action movie called Rebels Run, which is based on the alt hero comic books by Arkhaven Comics. And so we're in the development phase right now. We're getting the financing and the script all together. And I may or may not, depending on what happens with this COVID thing, but planning still to move to Atlanta, Georgia, and shoot the film there. And so that's kind of the big project I'm working on right now.
So Scooter, that kind of leads me to my question here. Because we're all stuck at home, we're all consuming all this stuff, but you guys are stuck at home as well. Where does this gap land entertainment-wise? Like, how far down the road do we start realizing that there was a 3-month period where nobody was making anything, or not making as much?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I mean, and on the one hand, you're probably going to have a whole bunch of people that are going to have screenplays and other properties to develop, and so there will be a little bit of a I anticipate there being a resurgence there of just people wanting, there being a need in the market for product, and then we'll have all the stuff that's been delayed is going to come out, whenever this whole thing ends. So it's gonna be pretty chaotic.
A Wild West run to be the first one back out, so to speak, because there's going to be some that...
Yeah.
Because that's what fascinates me, because I'm like sitting here like, because I'm watching all these other YouTubers, podcasters, like throwing up all of this content all the time, and I'm like, that's great until your audience gets addicted to that, wants that all the time, and then you're not there to deliver that all the time.
Yeah,
I mean,
sorry, yeah, it's gonna be a lot of talking head stuff, I think.
No,
there'd be a lot of horror movies set in one location during a quarantine
with bad actors.
A resurgence of the Blair Witch Project, you're saying?
Yeah.
Much, yeah. You know what? I mean, there are people who make use of this time, and good for them. It's a hustle, right? So while everybody's sitting on their asses, and if you're making something happen, good on you. That's awesome.
Well, I know that Netflix, for example, is still paying all of the people that are working on their shows. That had to, the shows they were currently in production on that had to go on hiatus. They're still paying those people. So, the sooner it all comes back, disruption there's going to be. But it's already affected a lot of production. Some of my friends out here are, out of work, and it's just an open question for production people whether they're gonna get back to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people online saying, "Well, thank God Hollywood's not doing anything." And on one hand, I do agree with them, because Hollywood is full of propaganda, and it's good to see them suffer. But on the other hand, you have a lot of just regular people who live paycheck to paycheck, doing work on film sets and production work, and they're suffering too, just like the rest of us, right? So, I try and think of them a little bit as well. Not that I can do anything, but something to keep in mind, I guess.
So I guess this question all depends on all this other stuff, but I'm going to ask it anyways. And I'll start with John, and I'm sure, Scooter, you can chime in, because your answers are going to be wildly different. Are you looking to take part in any of the campaign stuff or film anything around? I mean, it's election year. How involved in 2020 are you going to be?
Yeah, so I can only be so involved, being up here in Canada. But, I actually really dislike politics. The whole thing in 2016 was just because it was something fresh, right? And something that could actually bring some change for a change. But no, as far as politics goes, I'm really, I dislike it. I'm bored with it. So, I actually turned down a large project that had to do with that. And I also turned down another one that, anyway, I'm fairly picky. I mean, I don't have the money really to be picky, but I'm fairly picky when it comes to projects and things like that. So I probably won't be too involved, other than just being on Twitter and tweeting in support of who I think should win. So that's pretty much it for me. But things change, and who knows what can happen, right? I never really, I'm not too good at saying what's going to happen in the future. So.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. We're not wildly different at all there. I going and doing anything with like the election would not. I would not enjoy that because often the way it works is like, it's someone who has a particular agenda, and they're not going to let you necessarily explore your artistic vision. Because there's an end game in mind, right? Maybe those things can align sometimes, but for me, I would actually rather explore a lot of my political ideas through fiction, because in fiction there's like a more interesting argument that takes place because it's happening with characters in this story. You're not going to see me doing a Trump documentary or a Clinton documentary.
Well, if a big enough stack of money arrives, you might consider it, though.
Yes, I would like to reserve the opportunity to change my mind depending on the cash offer.
So, as we finish up here, guys, I'm going to kind of throw this again, both of you, because this is interesting to me, because I'm sitting here, I do audio, right? Like, this becomes really clean. It's really simple. The focus is just you guys. There's not all that goes around the process. But with you guys, you've got to look at the video, the music, what's being said. Take me somewhere in that process that I'm overlooking as I just rattled through that. Which part of that really gets you excited? We'll start with Jon.
Well, okay, so first thought that comes to mind. I've been reading this novel by a good friend named Roman McClay, and he wrote this novel called Sanction, and it's been really blowing up on Twitter and online and so on. And it's something I really urge you to check out called Sanction. You can get it on Amazon. Yeah, so he's got a very rich use of vocabulary, and one word that he uses a lot is called Gestalt. It's a German word, and it means more than the sum of its parts, right? So it's like when, like if you look at a human body, there's bones, there's muscles and whatnot, but a human being is more than the sum of those parts. So, there's a spirit involved, and there's a lot of intangible elements involved. And with filmmaking, it's like that. You're basically combining, like all these, you're combining all these different artistic disciplines. Like you're combining photography in the form of cinematography. You're combining writing. You're combining music into this one thing. And the one unique aspect of filmmaking is editing. Is video editing, which is really, it's basically, it's a manipulation of time. And that's the one unique aspect of filmmaking, and it's the most powerful one, also the most tedious one to actually do. But what I like about it is you can combine these different elements, and what you get out of it is something more than the separate parts. And that's when you really reach in. If you do it well enough, that's when you reach into somebody's soul with it. You're basically bypassing all their mental defenses. And this is why Hollywood is so good and so effective at propaganda for the last few decades, is because when somebody watches a film, if it's done skillfully, like if you mount a film with skill, it's going to bypass, the mental defenses that somebody might have, if it were like a debate or something. But it's more than just that. It's more than just bypassing their mental defenses. It's really making them feel things and making them think about, life in ways that they may not otherwise. It's a filter you put on reality, and I think it creates a lot of empathy. So it's very powerful. And but if you break it down, you're combining music, and of course we had Stephen Limbaugh do the score for Hoaxed. And I mean, this guy's just a genius. I mean, he's like, he's a total genius when it comes to this stuff, right? And using, the music especially too, if you use it skillfully, if you use it right, it can really create a mood that is so powerful. Like it's kind of hard to talk about because it's intangible, it's this abstract thing, but it's also very real. It has a real effect, and I think that's the power of film. Now, I did write a blog post on my site, a few months ago, probably about a year ago at this point, talking about this thing, and it can be abused, right? And I think that's what we've seen in Hollywood. It's been abused to make people fall in line, I guess. But again, it's a war. We have the same tools available to us, and like Mike said, we're in a war of narratives, right? And all media is narrative, and we're in a war of narrative. So I think people like us need to just enter the war for once instead of just being attacked all the time, right? So it's warfare, but it's also something beautiful. It's art, it's beauty, it's powerful. It's a very powerful tool.
Wow, there's nothing I could say that's going to top that. I like the camera. That was amazing. Jon, you need to clip that. You need to put that out. That was
I'll tell you what, man.
That was a gorgeous.
It's because I've been reading Sanction. That's why.
I thought he said he was bad at this podcast thing, but that last 2 minutes and 30 seconds says totally different.
I have my days. I mean, we did a podcast last year, and I'm not going to say the person, but somebody I really respect, and so on. We did a podcast. I mean, I crashed and burned. I have a mild speech impediment, and sometimes it doesn't show up, like tonight. other times it really shows up. And this one podcast we did, I don't even think the guy published it because it was just terrible. So I'm kind of skittish on doing podcasts, But anyway, that's a little background.
Okay, so Scoot, I'm gonna flip the question on you. What's the hardest part of it for you?
Oh, I think the hardest part is the part that we're in now, which is the getting the film out and getting eyes on it. And that's not my skill set. So it's both the getting the money for the project and the getting it out there. Those are the two question marks for me. That's why I've teamed up with smart people like Mike Cernovich and David Lugo, and to be smart enough to know how to market the movie. And also we teamed up with Jeff Bezos, I guess, for the marketing of this. Wait.
While we're here, I got to thank David for putting us all together, by the way. Great job. I was looking, because I seen the story and I'm like, I've got to get, that's relevant. So I want to thank him.
Yeah, no, he's he is what's it called? VIP, most valuable player, MVP. He's MVP #1 on this thing, and he's in the background, but he's been so key to all the stuff and all the success of Hoaxed. And actually, he I think yesterday he asked us if we wanted to go on InfoWars, and we're just like, dude, you go, man, you do it. You're well spoken, and you know the issues and all that. So I think he did it today. So that's something to watch out for as well, as Dave Lugo on InfoWars.
Yeah, he was on my show last week, and I wasn't playing, but it's just confluence of events, and I'm like, so I had it, the email address was, the email was still sitting there. I'm like, oh, I bet he knows something, and sure enough, he does, or did, or does. Yeah. Anyways, but back to the original point of that. That's got to be the hardest thing. You guys haven't worked on. This project's been out for a year. Obviously it was impactful, but nevertheless, you guys have been working on other things and went about your life, and then to cold stop and come back and talk about this again has to be difficult. Go ahead.
I'm enjoying it. I think it's it's a total blessing. This is always what we wanted. We always wanted for the film for it to be seen by as many people as possible, because we really believe that it's good, and if people see it, they're going to like it, and they're going to pass it on, and it's having the effect that we want, which is people that are on the right side of the spectrum, they see, oh, actually I've been lied to as well. Even if they know a lot of the information that we present, by the end they're inspired because of this amazing speech by Stefan Molyneux that John edited to perfection, and by the fact that we show the other side of the question of showing what fake news looks like when you're part of it. And then for people that are in the center left, they're watching and go, oh, okay, I see there's a whole different side to this that I maybe never saw before. Maybe I don't agree with everything, but I'm starting to see it now. I'm starting to see the other side. So our artistic goals for the film are it's happening. So it's a total blessing.
Yeah, you have to see it. I'm going to say that I did watch it, so you have to see it to understand what we're talking about. Guess I should have mentioned that at the top. It's got to go get it. Hey, gentlemen, I want to thank you and appreciate both your time tonight. We've got about a minute left, so I just want to wrap this up. So, Jon, thank you.
Thank you for having us. It's been a real pleasure, and it was good talking to you. Good conversation.
And whenever you need to promote something else, you know where to find me, right?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
And Scooter, the same holds true for you. Thank you this evening.
Yes, thanks a lot, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a good evening and stay virus-free, please.
Okay.
I almost did this in my mask,
All right, guys, that's that. Okay, so there you go. Banned from Amazon. Now, that's an interesting thing to have. I'm going to wrap the show up here nicely. Where does that lead? When the big powers can subjectively tell you what you can and can't buy from them, not just watch on their platform, but buy from them, this becomes an interesting problem. an interesting debate, an interesting thing to watch. And that's what I'm doing here. Watching, documenting, creating these moments. So later, when this all comes back around, you can say, oh yeah, I already knew about that. I heard that on the Malliard Report. That is what we're doing here, creating that retention.